WP Speed Fix here. In this video, we're going to talk about WordPress caching plugins, the best WordPress caching plugins, and why you need a caching plugin. I'm going to try and keep this video quite short as it doesn't really need to be long. Let's talk about caching first and what page caching specifically is what we're talking about here to get really technical. So let's talk about what is caching and what is page caching. So broadly speaking, a cache is where some work has been done by a server and the result of that work is stored somewhere for quick and fast retrieval. So no matter what type of caching it is, if it's database caching, page caching, edge caching, CDN caching, it means the work has been pre-done essentially. The work has been pre-done and it's saved, ready to go. So what that means for you as a visitor or as someone who runs a site, it basically means that all that background processing doesn't have to happen when someone accesses a resource. So when we talk about page caching, what that means in the context of WordPress, that all the database lookups and all the PHP processing, so WordPress uses the programming language PHP, all that work is done in advance and has been saved in a HTML file ready to serve up to the user. So to make a WordPress site fast, the number one thing it needs is page caching. Without page caching, every time you load a page, all that work has to be done. So depending on how many plugins you have and how complex your site is and everything else going on with it, that page building process can take anywhere from a second to 10 seconds, 20 seconds even. So having the cache in place basically brings that time down to milliseconds. So instead of that page taking 1 to 10 seconds to serve up to a visitor, that page can be served up in 1 or 200 milliseconds. So obviously that's a big speed difference. So that's why we need caching, and that's what page caching does. So in the context of WordPress, there's really two plugins we recommend. Now, there's a lot of stuff around the web you can read about plugins, technical specs, all sorts of nonsense that you can just go down the rabbit hole comparing detailed specifications. That's a mistake. So there's two plugins. We've optimized over 5,000 sites and there's only two plugins we use. One of them is WP Rocket, so wprocketplugin.com, and the other one is flyingpress.net. Those are pretty much the leading plugins, leading speed or page caching plugins or WordPress caching plugins. Now, they're two very different types of plugins. So WP Rocket is very popular, it's very mature, and it's very stable. So we generally use that because one of our kind of heuristics, or one of the important things we talk about when we talk about site speed, is that reliability beats speed. So you want your site to be reliable and you don't want to sacrifice reliability for speed. So what we found over thousands of websites is WP Rocket is very reliable, it's very stable, but it doesn't have all the bleeding edge features that FlyingPress has. So if reliability is important to you, then WP Rocket is the plugin to go with. If cutting edge features are important and you are technical, FlyingPress is probably a better plugin for you. It's more technical, it has more features in a sense, it's still very easy to set up. But what we found that for more complex websites, sometimes it can create problems. So again, we come back to reliability beats speed. Now, if you're technical, you understand how to fix things and you have the time and energy to spend time fiddling around fixing things. But if you care about reliability, if you're a marketing manager and the site needs to be online, otherwise it's your ass on the line, then WP Rocket is better. Now, these plugins do a whole bunch more than just page caching. They do a speed optimization on top of that. So FlyingPress has more features. It has integration with Cloudflare. You can actually save money, but you don't need the Cloudflare APO service in some cases if you use FlyingPress. They both have CDN stuff built in. We would recommend not using the CDN or content delivery network with WP Rocket and using Cloudflare instead and going with a direct Cloudflare account. FlyingPress can integrate directly with your Cloudflare account. But like I said, FlyingPress has more features and has more knobs and dials to play with. That's not necessarily a good thing. Now let's talk about even if your host is caching built in. So some hosts, like for example, WP Engine or Kinsta, they will have page caching built in. Our hosting platform, WP Alpha, has caching built in. You can turn it on. It doesn't have it by default. We would still recommend using a caching plugin even if you're on one of these hosts. So even if you're on one of these hosts, the caching plugin still does speed optimization on top of that. It does things like deferring JavaScript, lazy loading, pre-building the cache, managing the cache. So when you update a page on the website, it will go and clear the cache of that page so it's refreshed and the new version, the edited version of that page is available and it's pre-processed, ready to go. So even if you're on one of these hosts, we'd recommend still using a caching plugin. Again, we'd probably lean towards using WP Rocket because that is a more complex setup if the host already has caching. And basically the plugin will turn off its own internal page caching if that's the case. So again, same answer. Even if the host has caching, we recommend using the plugin and one of these two. Where Cloudflare fits into this, we have quite often have questions about Cloudflare versus WP Rocket. It's not one or the other. So Cloudflare is a content delivery network that does some speed optimization, also does some firewall and security stuff. And it also does something called edge caching, which is different to page caching. So it's not an either or. You would use Cloudflare as well as one of these plugins. Now, in terms of the speed optimization stuff, a lot of people get confused in terms of the role of these different plugins and using multiple plugins. Now, basically there's a checklist of speed optimization stuff you should do to have the site loading fast. So that would be things like image lazy loading, YouTube video lazy loading, deferring the JavaScript, maybe delaying the JavaScript until, delaying the execution of the JavaScript until the user interacts with the site. So basically there's a list of 50 to 100 different speed optimization technical tactics or techniques that they can be done in some cases by the caching plugin, or it could be done at Cloudflare, or it could be done on the web hosting, it could be done in several different areas, or there may even be other plugins you have installed to do different tasks. For example, when we do speed optimization, often we'll use WP Rocket and we'll use Perf Matters, and we'll move some of the functions to the Perf Matters plugin because it's better at those, and on that particular site that's important. And that might be something to do with the site layout, something specific to that site, that it just works better with that plugin. So keep that in mind, that broadly speaking, you don't want to kind of duplicate functionality. You don't want to have two things doing the same optimization. In some small cases, there is some crossover. For example, if you're using an image optimization plugin to compress images, which we would recommend you do, because the images are always going to be better if they're compressed on the hosting. If you're using a compression plugin, we would also still recommend you turn on the image compression in Cloudflare, because they're two different types of image compression. But that's an example where you might have a couple of overlapping features. So just to be clear on that, but broadly speaking, you don't want to have them overlapping. Now, common questions we get: should we use Lightspeed plugin? There's a lot of stuff around the web about Lightspeed web server being the fastest and the Lightspeed plugin being the best and all this sort of stuff. And almost every single site we've seen with the Lightspeed plugin is broken in some way. There is simply too much. It is massively overkill, the amount of settings and configuration that you can do with the Lightspeed plugin. It can be made to go faster, but for probably 99.9% of WordPress users and developers, they don't know what they're doing. They don't understand the nuance enough not to break things. And again, we come back to our kind of guiding heuristic that reliability beats speed. So we never want to sacrifice reliability for a marginal tiny increase in speed. So that's why I would say avoid using Lightspeed plugin. There are some other plugins around the web that we have used in the past that we generally don't recommend. One of them is WP Fastest Cache. It's an older plugin and it's great, but it is missing some features on the modern web. There are some old plugins that are only compatible with it. So in some cases, that's something to keep in mind, that you may have another plugin, shopping cart, LMS, something that needs a different caching plugin. So if you have a complex site, that might be a consideration for you. Other plugins, we've used W3 Total Cache. When we first started WP Speedfix 10 years ago, we used to use W3 Total Cache. One, because it was free. Two, WP Rocket was brand new and it wasn't great at the time. It was not so reliable. So again, we come back to our guiding heuristic. And there was a lot of features in W3 Total Cache, but the plugin owner has changed. The kind of values behind the plugin have changed, and we just, for most users, for someone who's watching a video on caching plugins, WP Rocket again would be a more simple, better approach for a DIYer, and then FlyingPress for someone who's more technical. There are other plugins that have added caching features over the years. For example, WP Optimizer is one. We wouldn't recommend that because it's too simple. There's not enough features in there. So remember, most of these plugins come with caching and they come with additional speed optimization features. So if you're using something like WP Optimize, you're going to have to use other plugins to do some additional things. So keep that in mind. There are other plugins around the web that are hosting specific. For example, Cloudways have their Breeze plugin, but again, we would, if we're doing optimization for a Cloudways site, we'd pull that out and we would use, again, WP Rocket FlyingPress. And SiteGround Optimizer as well, similar kind of thing. We would prefer use one of these plugins as opposed to the inbuilt plugin with SiteGround. So that's pretty much it in terms of these plugins. Again, falling down the rabbit hole in terms of all the weird and wonderful technical features they have is, it's not going to pay off. And if you're getting that technical, that you're looking at things like minification or this or that, you're probably going too far into it, and you're probably going to end up breaking your site. And that's probably another thing. There are some settings in some of these plugins that get removed over time. For example, minification and combining CSS and JavaScript is a really bad idea. And again, if you're DIYing, don't minify anything and don't combine the JavaScript or CSS. On the modern web in 2026, when we're making this video, it makes things slower, so it breaks other things down the line. Minifying CSS and JavaScript does nothing for speed. It does create unique temporary file names for JavaScript and CSS files, which means it breaks their ability to be cached by CDNs like Cloudflare and by the browser, and repeat visitors might end up getting to the website and having a broken website experience. So again, reliability over speed. And also, modern web servers do a whole bunch of compression. They do gzip compression and Brotli compression, which means minification does nothing. So that's just wasting time, and it's also wasting server resources, and you're running the risk of breaking things. Combining CSS and JavaScript, those are old optimizations that they're no longer relevant in the modern web, and you create a similar problem to minifying stuff where you create temporary file names with all the JavaScript put into one file, that when you clear the cache, that file name gets changed again. Thus, the cached copy in browser caches, so visitors that have been to the site, and places like Cloudflare, they are no longer correct, and you get situations where the website's broken when users go there. So that would be one caveat to keep in mind with caching plugins, is not to just blanket turn on all the features, particularly because caching plugins will still have minify and combine CSS and JavaScript in there. You just don't want to use those. That's pretty much it. Probably another note to keep in mind is you want to integrate these plugins with Cloudflare, so they have a section where you can integrate them with the Cloudflare API key. So one thing these plugins are doing is managing the cache as well. So that's why it's important on hosts that have caching built in, like WP Engine. They're managing the cache in terms of building it. So they're building it in advance. They'll work through and they'll build it off the sitemap. And then also, if you update the pages, it will clear the cache. It'll clear the page cache, and it will also clear Cloudflare's cache. That's also important for sites like WooCommerce sites where you're selling products all the time. And if you have low stock counts of products, you might have 3 units or 5 units or something, and they go out of stock, then you need the caching plugin to update that page to show the stock status reflected. So you're not selling stuff that's out of stock or creating issues for customers or a bad customer experience. So that's pretty much it. So these are, WP Rocket plugin.com and flyingpress.net. Here's the websites. They're both paid, but they're both dirt cheap. And for the cost here, so 1 year of WP Rocket, $60, $59. And then you'll see FlyingPress is probably the same. I think, yeah, $59, exactly the same. Was that the same? Yeah, $59.59. So same price there. It's well worth it. But, one lost customer just due to a slow site is going to be worth more than $59. So really kind of a no-brainer kind of purchase. If you want help with your site, if you're struggling with site speed and want someone to do it for you, you can head over to our website, wpspeedfix.com. request a free site audit on the homepage. One of the team will have a look at the site, come back to you. If you need help with something or you want to run some free tools, we have free SEO audit, core web vitals report, and site speed test powered by AI. They all take 60 to 90 seconds to run, completely free, no opt-in required, so you can check those out there as well. That's pretty much it. I'll leave you with it. If you have any questions, post in the comment section below. Happy to come back to you. Cheers.